من سلام عرض میکنم. یه مقدار طبق معمول همیشه منتظر میمونیم تا مخاطبمون اضافه بشن. سلام به همه دوستان که دارن به ما اضافه میشن. سلام به همه دوستان. ما یه مقدار منتظر میمونیم که مخاطبمون به یه حد نصابی برسن و بعد از اون شروع میکنیم با امید خدا. خب من توضیح تا موقع راجع به یه سری از مسائل بدم تا مخاطبانون به یه حدی برسن و بعد از اون پدرو رو اضافه کنیم. Hello Pedro, hello. Thanks for joining. As I told you, I'm talking in Farsi for a couple of words to let the Persian audiences, and after that I will ask you to join us. I will send you a request. خب سلام میکنم به همه. خیلی خوش اومدید به لایو ما. همونجوری که میدونید ما هر شنبه یه لایوی رو برگزار میکنیم در رابطه با تمرین اصولی موسیقی، آسیب‌های نوازندگی، پیشگیری از اون و میشه گفت به طور کلی رهایی در نوازندگی. چون خیلی وقت ما نوازنده‌ها رو میبینیم که تحت فشار ساز میزنن و این تحت فشار ساز زدنشون علاوه بر این که بحث عضلانیش هست، بحث در واقع شنیداریش هم هست. یعنی در نظر بگیرید که من به عنوان یه الان به عنوان یه کسی که دارم صحبت میکنم، اگر شروع کنم با لحن عصبانی صحبت کردن، با لحن پرفشار صحبت کردن، شما ناخودآگاه حس شاید مثلا چیز شبیه استرس یا اینکه دوست ندارید به صحبت من گوش بدید قاعدتاً بهتون رخ میده. و از اون طرف قضیه توی ساز زدن هم همین قضیه هست. یعنی من وقتی که شروع میکنم ساز زدن و پرفشار، ساز زدن مثل حرف زدن یه بیانه، اون بیان من پرفشار میشه و در نتیجه برای مخاطب خیلی چیز جذابی نخواهد بود. به همین خاطر ما شروع کردیم این سلسله لایوها رو گذاشتن که بتونیم موسیقی که دوست ارائه میکنیم هم مخاطب بهتری داشته باشه، مخاطب بیشتری داشته باشه و هم خودمون ازش لذت ببریم. چون ما هممون مسیر موسیقی رو شروع کردیم که خودمون لذت ببریم. خیلی وقتا هست نوازنده‌ها انقدر دارن پرفشار ساز میزنن از اون ساز زدن خودشون لذت نمیبرن و یعنی بدترین چیز. ما توی این لایوامون که هر شنبه به صورت ثابت فعلا 9:30 شب داره برگزار میشه، افراد مختلفی رو دعوت میکنیم و این هفته ما پدرو رو دعوت کردیم. پدرو نوازنده ویولنسل، آهنگساز، استاد دانشگاه است و نویسنده بسیار خوبیه. کتاباش در رابطه با الکساندر تکنیک و چیزهای مختلف دیگه توی دانشگاه بزرگ دنیا توسط مدرس الکساندر و مدرس ساز دیگه تدریس میشه. بسیار میتونم بگم آدم با دانش و با سوادیه و خیلی لطف کرده که امشب به ما اضافه شده. من یه توضیح راجع به لایو امشب و اینکه اصلا هدف لایو امشب چی هست بگم. پدرو قرار راجع به تمرین یک پارچه برام صحبت کنه. پدرو جزء کساییه که ما میگیم اصطلاحاً آدمایی هستن که شناورن، حرکت میکنن، یعنی هی اطلاعات به جدید به دست میارن، اینا رو با هم دیگه ادغام میکنن و میرن جلو. پدرو دقیقاً این قضیه رو داره، یعنی هی مطالب قبلی خودش رو میاد به روز میکنه و میبره جلو و این یعنی یه پژوهشگر همیشه مطالبی که ایجاد میکنه مطالب ثابت نیست همون همیشه باشه، هی میاد اونا رو آپدیت میکنه. پدرو هم دقیقاً همون اتفاق براش. توی حالا این سالیان که به عنوان مربی الکساندر جای مختلف دنیا درس داده، خیلی هم معروفه، اومده به چیزی رسیده در عنوان تمرین یک پارچه که حالا امشب خودش به همون توضیح خواهد داد که دقیقاً چیه و چه جوریه و خیلی به نظر من جذاب خواهد بود گوش دادن به یک کسی مثل پدرو. و من قبلش خودم راجع به تمرین توضیح بدم. راجع به تمرین موسیقی ببینید معمولا تمرین 3 تا فاز داره. فاز یکش میشه قبل از تمرین که من چجوری آماده بشم برای تمرین، که حالا هم شرایط فیزیکی داره مثل گرم کردن و اینا و هم شرایط ذهنی داره که من باید ذهنم اصلا آماده تمرین باشه. از طرف دیگه میایم روی قسمت زمان تمرین، خود تمرین. وقتی ما داریم تمرین میکنیم خیلی چیزا تاثیر داره، یعنی از وسایلی که داریم استفاده میکنیم، یا پایه نوت معمولی، اگه این پایه نوت ارتفاعش درست نباشه من باید گردنمو خم کنم یا اینجوری بشم، زیر پایم اگه اندازه نباشه مایچه پام تحت کشش قرار میگیره. برای همین یا مثلا اگر ذهنم آماده نباشه، ریلکس نباشه، اصلا تمرین که میکنم سودمند نیست. برای خیلیام پیش اومده تمرین میکنیم بعد که پا میشیم مثلا اسم میکنیم تمرین نکردیم، تفاوتی نکرده. یعنی این بخش زمان خود تمرین هم خیلی اهمیت داره. پس بخش یک شد قبل تمرین که اصلا چه چیزایی باید واسه تمرین آماده بشه. بخش دو شد خود تمرین. بخش سه میشه پایان تمرین. ما از تمرین کردیم یه نتیجه گیری بکنیم، یه اتفاق خوب برای ما داشته باشه. ما میگیم بعد از تمرین شما قطعا نیاز دارید که اول از همه یه زمان به ذهن بدید که اطلاعاتی که بهش دادید رو پردازش کنید. بهش میگیم پروسسینگ تایم. ذهن یه سری اطلاعات دریافت کنه. شما تو تمرین مثلا فلان قطعه رو با این حالت زدین، حالا باید یه تایم پردازش به ذهن بدین که بیاد بگه اصلا این اطلاعاتی که من دادی و بعد چجوری دسته‌بندی کنم، کجاها بذارم که بعداً استفاده کنم. این یکی. دومی که بحث سرد کردنه. میایم از ذهن خارج میشیم میره روی فیزیک. بحث سرد کردنه. شما میبینید نوازنده ساز میزنه بعد بدو پا میشه میره. خب این قاعدتا درست نخواهد بود. ورزشکارا مثل در واقع موزیسینا مثل ورزشکارا میمونن دیگه. دقیقاً از نظر اتفاق عضلانی یکی ان، دارن از عضله استفاده میکنن. به همین دلیل باید سرد کنن. من توضیح راجع به این قضیه دادم که یه خورده هم منتظر بمونیم تعداد مخاطبانمون بالاتر بره و حالا دیگه من کم کم پدرو رو درخواست بهش میدم که بهمون اضافه بشه، خودش بیشتر راجع به این صحبت میکنه. من دیگه از این بعدش رو انگلیسی صحبت میکنم. پدرو یه سری تمرین‌ها بهمون خواهد داد، خیلی جذابه. من خودم خیلی خوشحالم میخوام باهاش جلسه داشته باشم. اون تمریناتش هم با هم دیگه انجام میدیم و لذت میبریم. خب من دیگه شروع میکنم به انگلیسی صحبت کردن که پدرو رو دعوت کنم. Hello everybody who is here. Thanks for joining us. Tonight we have a live with Pedro, who I personally really admire as a professional musician, writer, and let's say a composer maybe. We are so happy to host him here tonight, and I'm sure this session would be really practical, and it of course has a lot of things to learn. Okay, Pedro, I know that you are here with us, and I'm going to join you. I'm going to ask you to join us now. Please accept the request and join us. I sent you the request, Pedro. Hello, Pedro.
Hey, it worked. What a wonderful
How
thing.
are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. The Farsi language is very beautiful. I understood almost nothing of what you said except for blah, 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 Pedro, blah, blah, blah. And otherwise, I didn't understand anything, but very nice language. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for accepting our invitation, and we are so glad to host you tonight. And I'm sure that I personally will learn a lot of things from you tonight.
Let's hope.
Thank you. And thank you for your kind words about Farsi.
Well, very musical language. And yeah, one day I'll have to learn it in the next life, maybe. Yeah.
Oh, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
We would be honored to speak to you in person.
That's good.
Thank you. Okay. Pedro, at first, I want you to talk about yourself. Tell us about your background and everything you'd like to share with us.
All right.
We're all ears.
Thank you. So I grew up in São Paulo, Brazil. São Paulo is a very big city. Today, the greater São Paulo has 24 million people. But when I was growing up in the 1960s and 70s, it only had about 15 million people. So at the time, it was a much smaller city. And I had a normal middle-class childhood and adolescence. I went to public schools that were not very, very good. And if you wanted to study music, you had to do it privately. There was no music in the actual public schools in Brazil. So you take private lessons here, or you join an orchestra or something like this. So the beginning of my musical education was very broken up, different activities in different places. And essentially, I didn't know what I was doing, and my family didn't know what they were doing. And in this ignorance of how a musician really gets trained, I took lessons and I showed an interest in music. When I was 14 years old, a great French cellist called Pierre Fournier gave a recital in São Paulo. I attended it with my mother, who was a very good amateur pianist. And the morning after, I said, Mom, I would like to become a professional cellist. So that was kind of the birth of my ambition, was the morning after the recital that Pierre Fournier gave in São Paulo. And I continued my lessons the best way I could at the time, not very directed, not very disciplined. And through a series of circumstances, I was able to go to the United States when I was 19 years old. This was 1977. And a wonderful American man whom I had met helped me go from Brazil to New York. And I went to a wonderful small arts school outside of New York City called SUNY Purchase, or the Purchase Conservatoire. Purchase is the name of a very small town outside New York City. I left Brazil and I started my exploration of the big world. And for 4 years, I did a traditional music training. So you do cello, chamber music, music history, you do orchestra, you do analysis, you do academics. Just a good, normal, traditional music training. And learning about life and about New York and learning English and learning about different kinds of people and going to concerts and struggling to figure out who I was and what I was trying to do. And while at Purchase, I changed cello teachers. And my new cello teacher, who was another wonderful man, he said, Pedro, when I watch you play the cello, you seem very awkward, Pedro. I think you could benefit from taking some lessons in the Alexander technique. So I was 20 years old. It was my second year in the States. And I went and I took lessons in the Alexander technique. And they were revolutionary because essentially I arrived at my lesson kind of like this. And my teacher did something kind of like this to me. And I left the lesson kind of like this. Very wonderful, but it created an identity crisis because who was I? Was I this man, which I was very familiar with, or was I this man who was a complete stranger to me? And to figure out who you are and who you want to be takes a whole life. So after my 4 years at Purchase, very good school, I went to graduate school and I went to Yale. And I did a master's in cello playing, still the very traditional training of cello, chamber music, orchestra. But I had a very good teacher of writing for musicians. You learn how to write notes for an LP or something like this. You wrote analysis. And that was the beginning of my interest in writing. It was in graduate school. After 6 years in the States, I left to London, and I lived in London for 7 years. I had my last cello teacher in London, and I trained as a teacher of the Alexander technique, still not knowing exactly who I was and what I was trying to do, but the training gave me something. I lived in London for 7 years, and still young and immature and struggling, and at some point I left London, and I came to Paris. That was 30 years ago. And I have lived in Paris for 30 years now. I'm 62 years old. And in Paris, I started writing, I started thinking, and I started learning French, and I started this, and I started that. And time passes, and I figure out who I want to be. Yeah, took a lot of work. It was not easy. It's very painful. I can tell you this, that become yourself is very hard work and somewhat painful, I think, at least in my case. So I started writing, and I wrote a whole bunch of things, books about music. I wrote novels as well that got published in the United States. I started traveling, and my first book, which was called Indirect Procedures, was nicely accepted by my colleagues, and that opened a lot of doors for me. So I started teaching and traveling more or less all over the world. And then I wrote my first novel called Befiddled, which is a music novel about a violinist. Then I wrote other books about music. Then with my own cello playing, I started improvising and composing. I started playing the cello and singing at the same time. I started performing not in the traditional manner with a traditional repertoire, but my own music with a kind of a theatrical idea. It was just a strange one-man show where I play and I sing and I shout and I make jokes and I enjoy myself very, very much. And that's myself. I make a joke and I'm happy making a joke about myself. Then I started studying the piano, and then I heard a voice saying, Pedro, now that you're studying the piano, why don't you write a piano method? And I heard the voice and said, whoa, what a good idea. So I wrote a piano method, which now I'm trying to convince my publisher to publish it. And yeah, so this is, I started in Brazil like this, and I went out into the world and I opened up and I found my center and my focus. And I like saying something very pretentious. It's like this. I used to be a cellist, and through a lot of hard work, I became a musician. Yeah. I know, yeah, it's very pretentious, it kind of sounds phony, but yeah, and then beyond being a musician, I became a creative individual. And that's where I am now. I play, I sing, I compose, I improvise, I write books, I teach, I travel, I meet people, I learn from people, I learn new languages, I learn new instruments. I am now learning the Native American flute. Hey, it's right here. I'll play like I'll play just two notes for you. And I'm also going to learn the guitar because I have a new guitar student, and he said, Pedro, how about you learn the guitar? And I said, okay. So yeah, I'm now beginning to learn the guitar. And that's who I am. This is what I'm doing right now. Right. Ask me another question or make a comment.
Yes, thank you. It was perfect. No, I was joining you during your trip, and it was wonderful, really lovely. I really admire you for your, for the way that you're brave in music, and you never stop someplace and say, okay, I'm a cellist and I only play the cello. You just explore new ideas, which is wonderful, and help us actually to expand our mind to learn new things, which is, I believe this is the music. As you tell us, you said, I used to be a cellist, but now I'm a musician, which is really important for us. Being a musician is being open to everything and understand and learn ideas, which is wonderful. I have a couple of questions regarding your introduction. You said that your mother is a pianist, yes?
She was a pianist. She passed away 25 years ago. She was quite a good amateur pianist, and my first memory of music is listening to her play the piano, the Scarlatti sonatas for piano. That's the first music that I remember. And I would, she would play the piano and I would just start jumping up and down because the music was so exciting. Yeah.
Scarlatti in A major, yes?
Well,
sonata in A major.
Well, he wrote 550 sonatas, and my mother probably played about 10 or 12 of those sonatas. So she played A major, she played E minor, she played D major, she played G minor, she played the tone, she played a lot of different things. Yeah.
Because my favorite one is the A major. I really like that. That's why I asked that question. Okay, as a child, did you used to actually receive piano lessons as well from your mother?
Oh, no. My mother was not a professional pianist, and also she was not concerned with teaching her children. We were 5. I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. She was not concerned with teaching us music. We didn't have that kind of tradition in our family. So I started my music training with the music initiation, where you play the recorder and you learn how to read music. You play the marimba a little bit. And then when I was 12 years old, I started taking cello lessons from a friend of the family. And I never really took piano lessons until I went to college, when you had to take secondary piano. So if you were a cellist, you had to learn the basics, the minimum basics of piano playing. But at home, my mother played the piano, and when I was learning the cello, I learned the cello repertoire playing with her, but I never took a piano lesson from my mother.
Oh, okay. And what happened that you immigrated to the USA?
Well, Brazil, at the time, but still today, the cultural life of Brazil is very complicated. When classical music goes up and down, sometimes there's a good orchestra and sometimes there are no orchestras, and sometimes there's a good teacher and sometimes there are no good teachers. So I think at the time, 1960s and 70s, most young musicians in Brazil dreamed of going abroad to the United States or to Germany or to France or to England to do a proper musical training, because in Brazil it was very difficult at the time. And I had a cello teacher for 2 years in Sao Paulo who was American, who was from New York, and he was playing in the symphony in Sao Paulo, and we got along very well. And then he went back to New York. He's just a few years older than me. And while in New York, he discovered this new little school, and he contacted me and said, Pedro, there's a new school near New York. Would you be interested in applying? And this man, who doesn't play the cello anymore, but he's my best friend, he did everything he could to help me go from Sao Paulo to the States. There are young musicians who stay in Brazil and do their training there. But back then, it was very, very complicated. The schools were really not very good. And if you wanted good training, you had to go. So I went.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful. And you said that you have studied music in the United States and then London. Did you receive music courses in London as well?
Yeah, in London, I had my last cello teacher, who was William Pleath, very famous because he was the teacher of Jacqueline Dupre. But he was
Oh,
also, a wonderful man and a good teacher and a very kind person, very helpful. And I also had my first singing teacher while I was in London. I took lessons for a year from a wonderful man, a bass baritone, and I was, as a singer, I was a beginner. I didn't really know that much about singing, and I learned a lot from him, and I had a good time, and I started developing my voice, and well, that was another wonderful thing in London. As far as my training was concerned, while I finished my cello lessons, I had my first singing teacher, and I finished my Alexander training, and I started teaching. And at the time, I tried to play, cello recitals, cello and piano recitals. That was the gist of my life in London for 7 years.
thank you for the clarification. Thank you.
Sure.
And let us know about the Alexander technique. What happened during those lessons? And what happened that you started to learn the Alexander as an Alexander teacher? Because Eddie has told me that you used to be a wonderful Alexander teacher, but now you don't teach it. Is that right?
It's not really true. It's a bit more complicated than that. So, the Alexander technique means different things to different people. And if you put 50 people in a room, 50 Alexander teachers, and you say, okay, guys, you are going to try to define the Alexander technique, and if you're not in agreement, you can't leave the room. And they will never leave the room, because those 50 people are having 50 very different experiences of this strange thing called the Alexander technique. But for me, the discovery of the Alexander technique was the discovery of a different way of being, the discovery of connecting and opening up, the discovery of growing, of lengthening and widening and occupying space. And in my own understanding of the Alexander technique, your body is what you think and feel about your body. And the Alexander technique is the discovery of this incredible, inseparable communication between the body, the mind, and the feelings, the emotions. And the lessons were very useful to me because I started opening up. And because I was opening up, something in myself said, Pedro, this thing is kind of interesting and you don't know enough about it. And if you do the training as a teacher, you will know a bit more about it. Go find out, the voice said to me. And I said to the voice, okay, I'll go find out. So I went to London and I did a training, a professional training for 3 years, learned a lot of stuff and started teaching lessons. But I finished my training almost 35 years ago, and I have learned many, many, many things over 35 years. And my interest in the Alexander technique melded with my interest in storytelling, making jokes, metaphysics, literature, cinema, the work of Carl Jung, Japanese martial arts, and all those things kind of became together in what I call integrated practice. And that means that
Wonderful.
what I like to do and what I like to teach and what I like to think about and what I like to share is this thing that brings many things together, of which one here is the Alexander technique. And that means I don't really teach the one thing called the Alexander technique. I put it together with a whole bunch of things. And yeah, so it's not as if I used to be an Alexander teacher. I would say I used to be an Alexander teacher of a certain type, and I have become an Alexander teacher of a different type, the type called integrated practice, which is kind of a different ballgame.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. The story was wonderful.
Sure.
Wonderful. And I really like that. The way that you decided to put all those things together was great.
Mm-hmm.
I was enjoying. And one thing, let's just put that road and aside and go to another road.
Mm-hmm.
Just tell us what vacancies did you find in the music education that made you interested in writing some books?
Uh-huh.
The books that you now, what happened that you decided to write books? What vacancies did you find?
All right. So you're using the word vacancies, and I think you could also call gaps. So what gaps, what holes, what things were missing? Now, in my own way of thinking, I don't even think of myself as a teacher, but I think of myself as a learner. And I like learning. I love learning. I'm learning my flute. I'm learning Spanish now. Portuguese is my mother tongue. And I'm learning the piano and I'm learning the guitar. And I was learning, well, I like learning. And what made me want to write a book was to deepen my own learning. Because if you try to write a book, you will see that you have gaps in understanding, that you can't really write the book unless you clarify something here. So I would say my first book was it was a kind of a learning project. Can I learn how to write a book? Can I learn how to explain this thing that's difficult to explain, called the Alexander technique? Can I grow as a musician, as an intellectual, as a person, as a man, by writing a book? So my motivation wasn't really to address a gap in music training. My motivation came from within, from my heart, and from my thirst for learning. I think I'm a learning addict. If I'm not learning something, I have withdrawal symptoms. I get nervous. I say, I have to learn something. I have to learn something. Well, and then the books have been really part of my learning. I had good teachers. I had good cello teachers. I had a really wonderful harmony and theory teacher who became my mentor. My singing teachers were wonderful. So my feeling wasn't so much that there were gaps in the music education, but there were gaps in my own understanding. And by writing a book, any book, I learned a lot. I highly recommend to people who want to learn something to write a book, because when you start, you see that, you don't know that much, Pedro. And then you start thinking and writing and thinking and reading and thinking and revising and thinking and sharing your pages with other people, and you learned a lot. I think that was my motivation, really.
Thank you. I always I tell my students that the great maestros are the best students. And now I have a good example for that. I can tell
Thank you.
your story, which is wonderful. And tell us about your books, the principal ideas in your books, and what did you actually want to represent in those ones?
Well, I'll put it this way. Before you write the book, you have a certain idea. During the writing of your book, you change your mind. After the book's finished, you change your mind again. And 10 years later, you change your mind again. So I can't really tell you what I had in my mind when I started writing 35 years ago. So I'll tell you a kind of a compromise, a kind of a lie. And I'll put it this way. My book about the Alexander technique is called Indirect Procedures. Those are words that Alexander himself used to describe his process. Suppose that you have a perception of a problem. The problem could be asthma, could be tendinitis, could be stage fright, could be a leg that's shorter than the other, could be that you're angry all the time. Well, you have some sort of problem, and you go see Alexander, you go see Mr. Alexander, he says, Mr. Alexander, I have a problem. I have tendinitis. And Mr. Alexander says, well, just relax about it. Let's think about something else. Let's talk about the way you're talking right now. Or let's talk about how you're moving and sitting. Or let's talk about the kind, well, it changes the subject. So instead of talking about the tendinitis, he says, forget about it. It just gets out of the way. And you begin to open up your perceptions and the perception of yourself and how you're thinking and feeling, how you talk to yourself about yourself. And 2 months later, suddenly you realize that you don't have tendinitis anymore. So you solve problems indirectly through indirect procedures. That's why I chose the title of the book. So in some way, it's a philosophy. Indirect procedures is a style of doing things in life. And what's I think very interesting about this work, the Alexander technique, is that your intentions, what you have in your mind, the thing that you want to do, determines your behavior. Let me use a very American expression. Some American person says, I really want to nail that bastard. And to nail that bastard means to really dominate something, really solve the problem once and for all. I want to nail that bastard. Well, that's a kind of an intention. It comes with a body language. It comes with an energy. As long as you have the intention to nail that bastard, you're going to be hurting yourself. So you have to change the intention. Maybe you could say, okay, I want to understand the bastard a little bit better. That's a different intention. It creates a different tone of voice and a different gesture. Alexander talked about it, and he called it end gaining. When you have an end in mind, I want to nail the bastard, that makes you crazy. And you have to calm down, clear your mind, open up, forget about the bastard, think about yourself a little bit. Now let's do a little work. And that's what this book tries to do. I don't know if I succeed or fail, but that's kind of the philosophy of this book. Then I wrote a very different book called Integrated Practice.
Let me just add something. I have just started to read the previous book. Mm-hmm. And I'm in the beginning, but I'm really enjoying it.
That's good. I enjoyed writing it, so I like it when a reader enjoys my writing because I enjoyed writing it.
I almost suggest everybody to read that book. I think it's good. It's really good.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So then I wrote this other book here, and we'll put it this way. Let's suppose you think you have a problem, or you're playing the guitar, or you're playing something by Bach, and you say, this goes too fast and I can't play it, and Bach makes my life difficult because he wrote something too complicated and I just hate this thing. And in that moment, music has become your problem. And this book tries to convince you that music is the solution to your problems. That if you let Bach talk to you, Bach will say, Pedro, you think I created a problem for you, but just look at this phrase here. If you really feel how the upbeat's going to the downbeat, You know, terodum, terodum, tiroding, tirodum, tirodum, torodum, pum, pum. Feel that, Pedro. Follow me as I draw this phrasing. And if you really follow me, you're going to solve your problems. You're going to feel good. So the gist of my book is that music itself, if you know how to respond to it, the music becomes your solution, your teacher, your guide, your friend, your cousin, your brother. You just look at that score by Beethoven, you say, oh my God, this is so wonderful. Oh, look at this phrase. Oh, look at this modulation here. And if I learn how to say the phrase that Beethoven wrote for me, if I really learn how to say it, I'm going to feel really, really, really good. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this book here. Then I wrote another book, which is my most recent book. You want to ask a question? Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. May I ask a question about the previous one?
Yeah.
Would you just elaborate how you do that? How you actually put the musician in the middle of the music to sense everything? Would you just elaborate a little bit about that? Thank you.
All right. So, unfortunately, it's not simple. There are too many factors involved. So we're going to use an image, and we're going to use the image of the labyrinth. In the labyrinth, it's a kind of a complicated path, maybe in a garden or made of stone or something like this, or inside a castle or deep down somewhere. And you have to enter the labyrinth and find your way, go here, go here, go here. Get lost, you have to get out again. Find a different entry point, go here, go here, go here. And then you get to the center of the labyrinth, where you find the treasure, or the girl, or the boy, or the wisdom, or the pleasure, or the letting go, or the love. So the thing that we're looking for is at the center of a really complex labyrinth. And the entry points are many, except not guaranteed. One entry point is for you to work on rhythm, in the language of rhythm, and the structure of rhythm, and how you put this note against this note, the 3 against the 2, and how, it's very different to go like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or like this. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Not the same thing. So you learn about the rhythm, and then you say, oh my God, all my life I thought it was just 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I see that I have options. I can go 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Or I can go 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Now I can look at the score and say, which one's going to work best with this phrase by Bach? Then you make a decision. You try it at the cello, the violin, the guitar. So one entry point is rhythm in its many manifestations. Another entry point is your perception of sound. And if you suppose that you have a day off and you're staying at home, it's confinement, you can't go out, then you can walk around your house and to every corner of the house, to the wall, to the window, to the mirror, to the piano, to anything, either you slap, or you say something, or you shout a little bit. You go, ho, ho. And if you go around your house and you go, ho, you will find that your house makes a lot of different kinds of sounds that you've never heard before. If I go to my kitchen sink and I go, ho, the acoustics of the kitchen sink are amazing. If I open the door into the courtyard of my building, it's like an amphitheater. If you go, ho, well, there's a little bit of an echo. So it's a different entry point. It's not the rhythm, but it's the sound. And suddenly you hear a lot more, and you say, oh my God, all these years I've been playing the cello, and I have never really, really heard the sounds that I was producing in this room or in that room. So there are other entry points. I'm just saying it's a big labyrinth. It's very complex. And to go all the way to the center of the labyrinth, not easy.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, thank you. The image was perfect. And it was a nice one. When you talk, I personally go deep and deep during, to your story, and is really helpful. You know? Now it's just turning some, let's say I'm just passing some turning points that I had in my mind, and I'm just passing those one and reaching them, which is really good. Thank you. Thank you so much. And tell us more about your next book. I just interrupted you. Sorry for that.
Not a problem. So I wrote more recently this book called The Integrated String Player. And by string player, I mean anybody who uses a bow. So it can be violin, viola, cello, bass, gamba, rebec, all those instruments. The book has video clips. So there are 80 video clips where I show the exercises. And it's a continuation of the same project where you open your field of perception, you hear more, you hear better, you open up your body and your mind, and you learn how to improvise, and you learn how to arrange things, and you learn the language, you learn how to speak Bach. Well, that's what I'm trying to do with this book here. I talk about the basics of the bow, and the basics of the left hand, and the basics of left and right talking to each other. Well, that's my most recent book.
Wow, that's great. That's great. Thank you. And how about the exercises? Are they all on the instrument, or may some of them be, instrumentless?
Yeah, like if you're going to walk around your house shouting at the wall and the kitchen sink, you don't need the instrument. You just need your house. So the book actually talks about this. There's a whole chapter on sound and hearing, and a whole bunch of exercises without the instrument. Yeah, if you take a teacup or something like this, and you just put it right next to your ear, suddenly your hearing is very different, and you hear your voice very different, because that teacup is going to amplify your voice in a certain way. Well, the book talks about this. So, yeah.
Thank you. And no, I have a lot of questions from you. Sorry.
I'm here just to talk to you. Anything you say is good.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. And let us know about the integrated practice. The way that you were describing that, I was really enthusiastic to learn more about that.
Well, suppose that you have a friend, or you meet somebody, or the cousin of a friend, and the cousin says, "Oh, tell me about music and being a professional musician. What is that like?" And then you say, "It's kind of complicated. There are a lot of dimensions. There's a lot of feelings. There's some traditions." Then well, it's difficult to explain things. So integrated practice is the same thing. It's a little bit difficult to explain in depth. But I'm going to give you an idea. And I'll go like this. I'll show 4 fingers. And this finger here is the first thing. It's a kind of a connection with life, or the universe, the mystery of life, the mystery of love, the sunset, the sunrise, all the mysterious things that we have a hard time talking about, but that we can live. You walk into a room and it's marvelous, and you don't know why. Or you listen to a baby shouting across the street, it's marvelous, and you don't know why. Or you see a bird in flight, it's marvelous, and you don't know why. So that's the very first thing. Then comes the second thing, which is I will acknowledge that I exist. I, Pedro, a guy who talks too much, who tries too hard, a guy who learns too many different things, a guy who is kind of nervous. Well, I am Pedro, so I'm just acknowledging my existence. Then comes a creative situation. That can be our talk, for instance. That's my creative situation tonight. And you and I are talking, you're asking questions, I'm telling some jokes. Well, this is our creative situation. And this is my response to the creative situation. It is what I decide to do. It's how I structure my thoughts and my speech. It's what people call technique. So it's like this. The universe and me meeting a creative situation and creating a technique to respond to the creative situation. That's integrated practice.
Oh, thank you. And what happened that you actually came to this conclusion about integrated practice? When you were introducing, you told us that there were some factors that you put all together. Could you please let us more about those factors?
Okay, I can do that. But I will talk about the Amazon River in Brazil. You know, we know that the Amazon River is the very, very big river, is about 3,500 kilometers, going from the Andes all the way to the Atlantic. And it's just this gigantic river. And that river is fed by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other rivers. And each one of those rivers is fed by some other rivers. So the whole system of rivers is extremely complex with many different um, rivers feeding it. So the life of an individual, your life or my life, is like a river. And the life that is your river is going to be fed by many different things. Your life is fed by the Farsi language and culture. Your life is fed by the guitar. Your life is also fed by speaking English. Your life is fed by technology and Instagram. Your life is fed by um, MuseMuscle. You know, it's a big river feeding your main river. So I think
Yes.
it's normal that every human being is like a river being fed by many different other rivers, smaller rivers. My integrated practice is always receiving this input from different rivers, and one is music itself, one is literature, one is languages. It's a big deal in my life, languages and words. One is storytelling, making jokes, and improvising comedy. It's a big deal in my life and in my teaching. Another is the Alexander technique, everything that I learned over the decades about it. Another is Aikido, the Japanese martial art. I studied it for a little while. I was a terrible, awkward beginner, but I think about Aikido every day. It's feeding my mind and it's feeding my work and it's creating some of the work that I do. Well, Aikido is part of my life, even though I don't practice it. And then there's the work of Carl Jung, the great Swiss doctor who talked about the archetypes and the unconscious and the relationship between men and women. Well, it's a very big deal in my life and in the way I think and in the way I teach. So you have all these different things like this that go towards the main river, and I'm just calling that main river integrated practice.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
You know, a vivid picture in our mind. Thank you. It was
Mhm.
perfect.
Sure.
Thank you. And one important thing. Let us know about your one-to-one teaching and what do you usually do with your students? Let's start from the beginners and go to intermediate and high levels, and after to your master classes. Let's
Uh,
start with beginners. What are the first steps that you usually teach?
my wife, Alexis, sometimes she gets very impatient with me because, Pedro, you never answer the questions, do you? So you asking me a simple question, what do you teach beginners? But I don't really think that way. There are some students who come to me who are highly trained professionals, but you could think that they're beginners because they're just highly trained in worrying a lot and feeling bad about themselves and about music. They had very difficult experiences in conservatoires or they come from difficult families. And that means they can be very advanced musicians, but they're beginners in learning how to relax and feel good. So I see every human being as a combination of advanced and beginner, and I do similar things to all students. To all students, I I yeah, I provoke them. I talk to them. I ask them questions. I create situations where you're being invited to react in some way. So this is, I would say, the basics of my teaching is one situation after another. Some of the situations seem very movement related. Do this, sit down, stand up, bend over, catch this ball. Others are more like, hey, okay, so now I'm going to ask you a question and you tell me, okay? And I say to the student, what's the capital of Turkmenistan? Now, Hamid, you probably know what's the capital of Turkmenistan, but most people don't know it. They get very, very nervous because they think they should know everything. They think they'll be punished if they don't know the capital of, if they don't know the answer. So I create the situation where I ask a question that is more or less absurd. The person gets very nervous and starts feeling bad. And then I invite the person to let go, relax. All you have to do is to say, I don't know. I don't know the capital of Turkmenistan. You know, Pedro, I don't know, but I feel good. If you want Pedro, if you want me, I can look up on Google. I'll look up on Google. Pedro, you want me to look up on Google? And then there's a change of mind where the person was nervous about not knowing until says, it's quite okay. I don't know and I feel good. And I do this for all students, beginners, intermediate, advanced. All of them will face some question for which I know they don't know the answer, so that they can train themselves to make a decision. Do I get nervous or do I relax? And that's the training, because if you decide to relax, you can learn things very well, very quickly. But if you decide to get nervous, yeah, it's not going to work. So I do that with everybody. I have many types of students, professional musicians who tend to be nervous, so they come. Now I have this guitar student, super talented. He's very musical, and he's the one who is going to make me learn the guitar. Well, he's a kind of a beginner, He's only been playing for a few years, but he plays extremely beautifully, and that means that he plays better than some great names in the guitar world that are just too tight. My student's not tight. He plays one note and it's gorgeous. So he's a beginner, but he's very advanced spiritually, very smart. Then I have some voice students, some singing students, some that I do just online. I taught a whole family of professional singers who were based in New York. 4 members of the family did these sessions, and all of them are very advanced, and they're beginners and they're intermediate at the same time. You meet them, you talk to them, you make some jokes, you do an exercise, you do something with the voice, or the vowel, or the consonant, or the head and the neck, or create a situation, and the guy learns how to relax first and then make a decision. Well, that's kind of what I do.
Wow, thank you. I really love to be your student.
Yeah, come to Paris, or we can do it on Instagram too. That works beautifully.
For sure. Yeah. I will do it for sure, because I couldn't agree more with you at that time that you said you can play one note, but you can play it beautifully, which is perfect. I believe that it's not the level of the music that you are playing. I mean, by level, I mean the difficulty or the required techniques that it needs. But I think it's how you understand that simple note and how you play it.
Quite right.
All music is that. Note technique is like, for example, it's just run. We are just when we just practice techniques, we are just running, but we don't know the destination. We
Quite right.
do not watch around us. We are just like this and we are running. So that's not music, of course. But as you said, one note beautifully is music. I totally believe in that.
Quite right. You're 100% right.
Yes, that's why I want to be your student.
Incidentally, excuse me for interrupting, but I think that very soon Instagram will cut our connection because we're coming up to 1 hour. And I think you told me that after 1 hour, Instagram says, guys, you've talked too much. Do we need to prepare?
Yes. Yes, we are reaching. We still have 6 minutes. I think we can continue. Yes, we can continue. And when it was finished, we can start another one for the exercises that you told me you have prepared. Is it okay?
That's fine.
Okay, I just try to finish my questions. And I don't want to make you tired. About the way that you teach, as far as I understood, you usually pops up a questions in the student's mind at first, and then you help the student to actually answer that question in the best way. Is that the way that you do? Actually, you work with the students?
I would put it a little bit differently. I create a situation, And sometimes the situations that I ask a question that I know the student might not be able to answer. And the student's going to react to the situation. And the real learning is for you to realize that you have a choice as how you react. You can get nervous, you can start laughing, you can start shouting, you can say something that's not true, you can ask a question back, and suddenly you see that you have a whole bunch of choices. So I create the situation and the student makes a choice. The asking of a question is just one situation, but there are hundreds, maybe thousands of different situations that we can create in the teaching. You know, if I say to a student, a music student, okay, why don't you do an improvisation using the pentatonic scale? And for some people, oh, they get so nervous. They are not sure what's the pentatonic scale, and they think they should know, and they think they will be punished because they don't know. So there'll be a different, it's not a question like the pentatonic scale. I'm just saying, situation, make a choice. Situation, make a choice. Situation, make a choice. This goes on until you become an expert in making choices. That's the learning.
Yes. Thank you. And let us know, what are you doing now? Are you working on a new book, or are you just developing new ideas?
Well, I tend to work on many projects at the same time. I don't have children. I don't play in an orchestra. I don't go to the office. So I'm a full-time explorer and learner of ideas and doing things. So I do many things at the same time. I have a series of online classes going on right now, some for musicians and some really about the creativity and the way of thinking and let's call it the philosophy, the practical philosophy of life. My classes of this practical philosophy are called the power of four. When you use four ideas or four words to put something together, because four traditionally has tremendous power. We have the four seasons, the four temperaments, the four elements. We have the four evangelists. I developed a method to play with the number four and become creative and smart. So I have a seminar coming up with 8 sessions doing this. Then I'm doing sessions for musicians, 2 types of sessions. One's called Musician at Work. A small group can meet every 2 weeks and talk about what they're learning, what their problems are, how they're feeling about the score. And together we talk and we work and we try new techniques. And I'm doing another series called The Integrated Musician, which essentially goes through most of the materials of this book here in 12 sessions of 2 hours each. And in addition to that, I'm trying to finish my piano method and trying to convince my publisher to publish it. Those are the main things that I'm doing right now.
That's perfect. And I think we are reaching the limited time. Do you agree to just finish it 1 minute before it gives us an alarm, and then start the second one?
You're the expert. You've been doing this for longer than I have, so we will see what happens. I think at some point Instagram will just go whoop, 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 whoop. And then you have to go to Instagram and send me another invitation to come back. I think this is what's going to happen.
At first, I will save this one. It takes about 1 or 2 minutes. After that, I go live again and send you the request. Is it okay?
That's really good.
See you in
Not a problem.
See you in a couple of minutes.
All right.
Thank you. See you.
Sure.